It was a typical Thursday evening at our place, nestled on the outskirts of a sprawling city. Tom and I had settled into our usual routine, him with a beer in hand, lounging on the couch after a long day at his auto repair shop, and me, Nora, eyes glued to my laptop, tracking the latest stock and cryptocurrency trends. Our home, a cozy two-story we picked out for its promise of family and future, now felt more like a battleground for our increasingly divergent lives. "So, how was the market today?" Tom asked, his tone casual, but I sensed the underlying tension. It had become our norm. "Same as always, ups and downs." "Crypto's looking good, though," I replied, trying to keep the peace. Tom scoffed, setting his beer down with a little too much force. "Crypto, again? You know, not everything that glitters is gold, Nora." I sighed, closing my laptop, bracing for the conversation we'd had countless times. "And not every car that comes into your shop is worth fixing, but you do it anyway, because you see the value in it." "Why can't you see the value in what I'm doing?" "Because cars are real, Nora. You can touch them, fix them, sell them. What you're doing, throwing our money at the wind, hoping it'll fly back with more, it's just reckless." I felt the anger bubble up, the same old argument wearing thin. "Reckless? It's not reckless, Tom. It's calculated. There's a difference between gambling and investing. I wish you'd try to understand that." Tom stood up, pacing now. "Calculated? You call putting our hard-earned money into something as volatile as cryptocurrency calculated?" "Yes, I do, because I don't go in blind. I research, I study trends, I make informed decisions. It's no different from what you do with your shop." "My shop is a sure thing, Nora. People always need car repairs. But this? This is just a phase. What happens when it crashes, huh? What then? We could lose money in any investment, Tom. The shop could falter. Nothing's guaranteed. But we've seen good returns on my investments. Isn't that worth something?" Tom stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's not just about the money, Nora. It's about security, about not risking everything on a damn coin flip. Why can't we invest more in the shop, expand it? That's a real, tangible way to grow our money. And put all our eggs in one basket? What if something happens to the shop, Tom? Diversification is key. That's investing 101. He shook his head, the gap between our perspectives as vast as ever. "Diversification, sure. But into something stable, not this digital fairy dust." I stood up now, feeling the need to defend my choices, my independence. "You know, for someone who runs his own business, you're surprisingly close-minded. And you're surprisingly stubborn," he shot back. "All I'm saying is, we could be using that money to build something lasting, something we can see and touch, not just numbers on a screen." The conversation was going nowhere, as usual. "Let's just agree to disagree, okay? I won't criticize how you run your shop, and you don't criticize my investments." Tom sighed, the fight draining from him. "Fine. But just remember, Nora, when all this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." The tension between Tom and me wasn't the only strain in our lives. His family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Living close to his parents and sister meant frequent interactions, each one a reminder of our differing views on family and responsibility. It was a Sunday afternoon when Tom suggested we visit his parents. The idea alone made my stomach knot. It wasn't the parents I minded, it was Sarah, Tom's sister. Her lifestyle and choices were a constant source of bewilderment to me. "Come on, Nora, it's been ages since we've seen them. And Mum's been asking about you. And more. You know Dad is fighting cancer." Tom pressed, noticing my hesitation. "Yeah, I bet Sarah's missed me too," I muttered, my sarcasm not lost on Tom. "Look, I know you two don't see eye to eye, but can't you just— I don't know, try? For me?" Sighing, I agreed. "Fine, but I'm not staying if she starts on one of her shopping spree stories." We arrived to find Sarah already there, flaunting her latest designer bag. The air of superiority she carried like a perfume instantly grated on me. "Look at this, just got it yesterday. Isn't it just fabulous?" she gushed, barely acknowledging our presence. "It's something," I managed to say, biting my tongue. Tom's mother, oblivious to the tension, ushered us in. "Nora, dear, so glad you could make it. You two should visit more often." The afternoon dragged on, with Sarah dominating the conversation, recounting her latest vacation and shopping exploits. I tried to keep a neutral face, engaging in minimal conversation, but my patience was wearing thin. "So, Nora, still playing with your stocks and bits?" Sarah sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's called investing, Sarah. You should try it sometime instead of blowing through money on things you don't need," I shot back, my annoyance breaking through. Tom shot me a warning look, but it was too late. Sarah scoffed. "Investing? Please, like gambling on the internet is anything to brag about. At least when I spend my money, I have something to show for it." "Something to show until it goes out of fashion next season," I retorted, unable to help myself. "That's enough, both of you," Tom's father interjected, his tone stern. "We're here to enjoy each other's company, not to argue about whatever this is." The rest of the visit passed in an uncomfortable silence. As we left, Tom couldn't hold back his frustration. "Nora, why do you have to provoke her? Can't you just let it go for one afternoon?" "Me? Provoke her? She's the one who started it with her snide remarks. I'm just not going to sit there and take it, Tom. It's just, sometimes I wish you'd try a little harder, for the sake of peace." "Try harder?" "Tom, I'm not the one splurging on luxuries and then flaunting them in everyone's face. Why doesn't anyone tell her to stop acting like a spoiled brat?" "Because she's family, Nora. We look out for each other, even if we don't always agree with what they're doing." "That's just it, Tom. Looking out for each other is one thing, but enabling bad behavior is another. There's a difference, and it's about time someone pointed it out to her." Tom sighed, the weariness evident in his voice. I know. But what can we do? She's set in her ways, and Mom and Dad aren't going to change how they treat her. It's not just about Sarah, Tom. It's about us, too. How are we supposed to plan for our future when there's always going to be this financial black hole in your family? "We'll figure it out, Nora. We always do." The news hit us hard and fast. Tom's dad, Mr. Harrison, had lost his battle with cancer. It felt like one moment we were discussing treatment options, and the next, we were plunged into mourning. Amidst the shock and grief, Sarah, Tom's sister, took charge of the funeral arrangements. It wasn't long before she dropped a bombshell on us about the cost. Sitting in our living room, looking like a storm cloud had settled over his head, Tom relayed what Sarah had told him. "Nora, Sarah says the funeral's gonna cost $60,000. She's expecting us to chip in half." I nearly choked on my tea. $60,000? Tom, that's insane. Are we funding a funeral or a royal wedding here? Tom's face darkened, his eyes narrowing. "Now's not the time, Nora. This isn't about the money. It's about giving my dad the send-off he deserves." "But $60,000? There has to be a mistake. It's too much." "Too much?" Tom's voice rose, and I could see the vein in his forehead starting to pulse. "My dad has just died, Nora. And here you are, haggling over pennies. What's wrong with you?" I flinched at his harshness. "I'm not haggling, Tom. I'm just shocked. We never even spent that kind of money on our own house." Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? I don't need this. I don't need you telling me what's too much for my own father's funeral. If you can't see past your damn spreadsheets for once, maybe you should just stay out of it." The hurt from his words cut deep, but I swallowed my retort. This was grief talking, not my Tom. I'm sorry, Tom. I'll transfer the $30,000 to Sarah. It's just, this is a lot to process. Tom paced the room, hands buried in his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize over the years. Yeah, well, it's not just about the money, Nora. It's about doing right by him. And if that means paying whatever it costs, then so be it. When I confirmed the transfer to Sarah, Tom barely acknowledged it, lost in his own world of grief and anger. The distance between us felt like miles, not the few feet of our living room. Walking into the funeral agency, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The last few days had been a blur of grief and confusion, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to learn. I'm here for Mr. Harrison's funeral, I announced to the woman behind the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up from her computer, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're a day late. Mr. Harrison was cremated yesterday. My heart stopped. What? But, how? I was told the funeral was today. She shook her head gently, her eyes full of sympathy. The family requested to move the date forward. I'm very sorry for your loss and the confusion. I stood there, dumbfounded, my mind racing. How could Tom not tell me? Why was I left in the dark about such a significant change? Fuming, I dialed Tom's number, my fingers shaking with anger and disbelief. Tom, why the hell didn't you tell me the funeral was moved? I just showed up like an idiot, only to find out I missed everything. Tom's voice was cold, detached. Because I didn't think you cared, Nora. All you've done is complain about the costs and question every decision. Why would I think you'd want to be there? Because he was my father-in-law. Because I'm your wife. How could you just exclude me like that? My voice cracked, a mixture of hurt and fury. Well, maybe not for long, he shot back, and I could almost hear the bitterness seeping through the phone. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded, my heart sinking. I'm done, Nora. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's so indifferent. You're more concerned with your bitcoins and shares than with this family. I've got the divorce papers ready. His words were like a slap in the face. Divorce? Was he serious? You're kidding, right? Over this? Tom, we can talk about it, we can work things out. No, Nora. It's too late. The house is going up for sale. We'll split everything and go our separate ways. That's it. I was speechless, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Stunned, I wandered back to the parking lot, where I saw Sarah pulling in, driving a brand new luxury car. The sight of it made my blood boil. Nice car, Sarah. Where'd you get the money for this? Inheritance? Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she tossed her hair back. Yeah, something like that. Dad left me a little something. The casual way she mentioned her father, with shopping bags in her hands and not a trace of sadness on her face, was infuriating. A little something, huh? Looks like morning is treating you pretty well. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a smirk. Well, we all grieve in our own ways, don't we? Some of us invest in stocks, and some of us in cars. I clenched my fists, the injustice of it all burning inside me. This was all wrong. Tom and I were falling apart, and here was Sarah, benefiting from the chaos. Enjoy the car, Sarah. Looks like it cost a pretty penny. Or should I say, a pretty dollar? She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty parking lot. Oh, Nora, always so concerned about the money. Don't worry, it's all been taken care of. I watched her walk away, her laughter lingering in the air. The man I loved wanted nothing to do with me, and the family I had tried to be a part of was showing their true colors. The days following the funeral felt like navigating through a thick fog of disbelief and betrayal. The weight of the divorce papers in my bag felt like carrying a boulder, a constant reminder of my crumbling marriage. But the sight of Sarah's new luxury car planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't shake off. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to pay a visit to the funeral home, hoping to uncover some answers. Walking into the funeral home, a mix of suspicion and determination fueled my steps. It felt surreal, being here under these circumstances, but I needed answers. The place was quiet, the air filled with a solemnity fitting its purpose. At the reception, I recognized a face from the past: Jackie, a classmate from high school who'd ended up in the most unexpected of places. "Jackie!" I exclaimed, a bit too loudly for the setting. "I didn't know you worked here." She looked up, surprise flickering across her face, before recognition set in. "Nora? Wow, it's been ages. What brings you here? Something I can help with?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Yeah, actually. It's about my father-in-law's funeral. I heard it was arranged here." Jackie's expression turned professional, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Sure, let me pull up the details. Give me a sec." As she typed away, I fidgeted, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The moment she found the record, her brows furrowed. "Okay, here it is." The service was pretty standard. Cremation was requested, keeping things on the simpler side. The total came to $5,000. My heart sank. $5,000? But that's not what we were told. We paid $60,000, or at least, we were led to believe that's what it cost. Jackie paused, her face a mask of concern. "That's a huge difference. It was Sarah who handled the arrangements, right? Everything here was billed at $5,000, no more." The pieces were starting to fit together, a picture I didn't want to see. "Can you print me a copy of that bill? I need proof." "Sure thing," Jackie said, her tone sympathetic. She quickly printed out a duplicate of the check and handed it to me. Holding the paper, it felt like a piece of a puzzle that would unravel a bigger deception. "Thanks, Jackie. I've got to sort this out." Armed with the printout from the funeral home, my next stop was confronting the family, particularly Sarah. The air felt heavy as I drove to my mother-in-law's house, where I knew they'd all be gathered, probably discussing the estate and the aftermath of the funeral. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. I hesitated at the door, gathering my courage before stepping inside. The sound of my footsteps seemed to echo through the hallway, announcing my arrival. In the living room, Tom, Sarah, and my mother-in-law were seated, looking like a picture of mourning that was about to be shattered. My mother-in-law, her eyes shadowed with grief, broke the silence first. "Dear, we missed you yesterday at the funeral. We thought you'd be there." Taking a deep breath, I replied, "I was told it was today." "I'm so sorry for your loss," my voice steady, despite the churn of emotions inside me. I then turned to Tom. "Can we talk? In private?" I hoped to spare his mother any more distress. Tom's response cut through the room. "No secrets here. You're not part of this family anymore, remember?" His words stung, but I pushed on, pulling out the check from the funeral home. "Then explain this to me. The funeral cost $5,000, not the $60,000, Sarah claimed. Where did the rest go?" Tom looked genuinely shocked, turning to Sarah with a bewildered, "What's this about?" Sarah squirmed under our gazes. I needed the money," she finally admitted, her voice small. The revelation seemed to hang in the air until Tom's mom, overhearing, added, "Your father saved for his own farewell. I even gave Sarah $10,000 more to cover everything." I did the math out loud, tension rising. $70,000 in total, and only $5,000 spent. "Sarah, where's the rest?" Flustered, Sarah confessed to splurging the money on a new car for herself, her gaze darting away, unable to meet mine. I expected Tom to explode, but instead, he almost tenderly told Sarah, "You shouldn't have done that. Be more careful next time." His response floored me. Careful? She committed fraud, Tom. And you're okay with that? Tom's justification left me reeling. You wouldn't understand. You've got no family, you don't get what it means to stick together. That was the last straw. In front of them all, I signed the divorce papers with a flourish. Sarah, you owe me $30,000. Pay up, or I'm going to the police. Tom's protests followed me out the door, but I didn't look back. I'd seen enough, heard enough. The betrayal was complete, and so was my resolve. As I walked away, the finality of my actions settled in. There was no going back, only forward from here, away from the lies and the deceit that had marred what I once thought of as family. Packing up my life into boxes felt surreal, like I was an observer in my own story. The for sale sign outside the house was a stark reminder of the finality of it all. By afternoon, I was settling into a small apartment that felt more like a fresh start than a downgrade. That evening, as I was sorting through the remnants of my past life, my phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen, a name I no longer felt attached to. I answered, curiosity edging out resentment. Nora, you need to back off, Sarah. Tom's voice came through, tinged with an uncharacteristic harshness. Back off? I laughed, cold and sharp. Not a chance, Tom. She took from me, and I want it back. Your sister's a thief. Tom was silent for a moment. She's family. You wouldn't understand. Family? I scoffed. That ship has sailed, Tom. As far as I'm concerned, you and your sister are just people I used to know. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. Save it. Sarah has 2 weeks to return my money, or I'm pressing charges. And you? Stay out of it. You're nothing to me now. Hanging up, I felt a mix of sadness and liberation. The man I once loved was now just another obstacle in my path to reclaiming my life. 2 weeks later, a knock at my door heralded the return of my $30,000. Sarah stood there, her posture defiant, a sneer playing on her lips. Here's your money, she spat, thrusting an envelope into my hands. Happy now, you money-grubbing witch? I took the envelope, my gaze steady. It's not about the money, Sarah. It's about principle. About not letting you walk all over people. She laughed, hollow and bitter. Whatever helps you sleep at night. As she turned to leave, I called out. Just remember, Sarah. Karma's a real pain. What goes around, comes around. Closing the door, I leaned against it, the envelope heavy in my hand. The money was a small victory, but the real win was standing up for myself, refusing to be a victim of their greed and lies. Life had found a new rhythm, calmer and more predictable, when out of the blue, my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Tom, a voice from a past I had neatly folded away. Hey, I need a favor. A big one. Tom's voice sounded more worn than I remembered. I paused, the suddenness of the call throwing me. A favor? Tom, we're past favors, don't you think? It's Sarah. She's in deep this time. Debt's up to her eyeballs, and the wolves are at the door. We've sold everything, the house, the shop, it's still not enough. His words took a moment to sink in. And you're calling me why? I'm not part of this circus anymore, Tom. He sighed, a sound of desperation. Come on, don't be like that. You got out, made it big with your trading. Can't you spare something, for old time's sake? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he still saw me as a lifeline for their mess. Spare something? For her? After she nearly ruined us with her lies? You've got some nerve, Tom. It's not just for her. It's for all of us. You wouldn't be where you are without me. Don't forget that, he countered, his voice edged with bitterness. A laugh, sharp and short, escaped me. Where I am is despite you, not because of you. You think I owe you? That's rich. There was silence on the line, heavy and uncomfortable. So, that's it then? You're going to turn your back on us? Us? There is no us, Tom. There hasn't been for a long time. And as for turning my back, I think you've got me confused with someone who still cares. Hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also relief. That chapter of my life was truly closed now. Sitting in the living room of my new house, a place I had earned with my sweat and smarts, I realized how far I had come. This was my sanctuary, built not on the shaky grounds of deceit and manipulation, but on my resilience and hard work.
During our third anniversary dinner, Eli casually mentioned that our credit cards were maxed out when I brought up taking a dream vacation. It felt like a punch to the gut. We had always been careful with money, so hearing this caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean the cards are maxed out?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Eli shrugged nonchalantly. "It's no big deal, babe. I've just been hitting the casino a little harder than usual lately, but it's under control." My mind was racing. How could he have racked up so much debt without me knowing? And gambling? That was a side of him I'd never seen before. Over the next few days, I dug deeper into our finances. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. Eli had taken out multiple credit cards and loans, all to fuel his gambling addiction. We were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. When I confronted him, he broke down, admitting everything. He had been struggling with a gambling problem for over a year, and had been too ashamed to tell me. The tears streaming down his face almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. "We have to file for bankruptcy," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "There's no other way out of this mess." Eli shook his head adamantly. "No, there's another option. My brother Cal. We can transfer the house to his name temporarily. That way, it's protected from the creditors until I can get back on my feet." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want to lie to your own brother and risk losing our home?" "Absolutely not." But Eli was relentless, begging and pleading until I finally caved. I knew it was a terrible idea, but I was desperate to save our marriage and finances. Little did I know, it was just the beginning of Eli's betrayal. Despite my reservations, I went through with Eli's plan to temporarily transfer our house to his brother Cal's name. I tried to convince myself that he was doing this to protect our assets, that it really was just a short-term solution until he got back on his feet. When we met with Cal and his wife Darcy to explain the situation, I could barely look them in the eye. Eli did most of the talking, spinning his web of lies about needing to protect our home from creditors while he sorted out some business issues. "I don't understand," Darcy said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Why do you need to put the house in Cal's name? Can't you just file for bankruptcy?" Eli flashed her his most charming smile. "It's just a temporary measure, sweetheart. We'll have everything sorted out in a few months, and then we'll transfer it right back. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about it." I cringed at his condescending tone, but Darcy seemed to accept his explanation. Cal, however, looked uneasy. He pulled me aside while Eli and Darcy chatted in the other room. "You sure about this, Rowan?" he asked, his voice low. "It seems a little shady, even for my brother." I forced a smile, trying to quell the growing knot of doubt in my stomach. "It'll be fine, Cal. Just a few months, and then everything will be back to normal." Famous last words. Over the next few weeks, Eli's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was gone for days at a time, claiming he was working on sorting out our financial mess. When he was home, he was irritable and distant, snapping at me over the smallest things. One night, as he stumbled in well past midnight, reeking of booze and perfume that wasn't mine, I knew the truth. He was having an affair. I confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it. "What did you expect, Rowan?" He slurred, his words laced with venom. "You think I was going to stay faithful to a pathetic, nagging wife like you?" In that moment, I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life by trusting him. But I also knew that I couldn't just roll over and let him destroy me. It was time to fight back. After Eli's drunken confession about his affair, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Not only had he lied about our finances and put our home at risk, but he had also betrayed our marriage vows in the most despicable way. In a daze, I spent the next few days trying to piece together what to do next. I consulted with a lawyer, hoping there was a way out of this mess. But the news was grim. Because we had transferred the house to Cal's name, and with Eli's extensive debts, I had very limited options. The best thing you can do is try to gather as much evidence as possible, the lawyer advised. Proof of his financial misdeeds, the affair, anything that can help build a case against him. So that's what I did. I became a private investigator in my own life, documenting every lie, every shady transaction, every sign of Eli's infidelity. I even managed to get copies of his credit card statements, revealing just how deep his gambling addiction ran. Meanwhile, Eli continued to spiral out of control. He was gone more nights than not, coming home reeking of booze and another woman's perfume. I stopped asking where he'd been or trying to reason with him. It was clear he was too far gone. The one bright spot in this whole mess was my newfound friendship with Darcy. As Cal's wife, she had been just as blindsided by Eli's schemes as I was. We bonded over our shared sense of betrayal, and she became my confidant, helping me gather evidence and offering a shoulder to cry on. "I can't believe Cal was mixed up in all of this," she said one day, shaking her head in disbelief. "He's always been the responsible one." I squeezed her hand, understanding her pain all too well. Eli has a way of manipulating people. He fooled us both. As the weeks passed, my anger towards Eli only grew stronger, not just for what he had done to me, but for dragging his own brother into his web of lies. Cal and Darcy didn't deserve to be collateral damage in his selfish quest for self-destruction. That's when I started to formulate a plan. I was done being the victim. It was time for Eli to face the consequences of his actions, and I was going to make sure he paid for every single lie. As the weeks dragged on, Eli's behavior only grew more erratic and destructive. He was rarely home, and when he was either passed out drunk or raging about something inconsequential. I started staying with Darcy more often than not, just to avoid his toxic presence. "You can't keep living like this," Darcy said one night as we split a bottle of wine on her patio. "He's going to drag you down with him if you're not careful." I took a long sip, the bitter liquid burning my throat. "I know. Believe me, I want out of this marriage more than anything. But he's made it impossible for me to leave." Darcy's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Surely there's a way to divorce his sorry ass and get your house back." Shaking my head, I explained how Eli had me transfer the deed to Cal, making it nearly impossible for me to claim ownership again. As the words left my mouth, I could see the realization dawn on Darcy's face. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. "He used my husband too. Oh, he is going to pay for this." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Darcy and Cal too. For the first time in months, I felt like I had an ally in my corner, someone who understood the depth of Eli's betrayal. Over the next few weeks, Darcy and I became co-conspirators, gathering every shred of evidence we could find against Eli. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, nothing was off limits. We built a mountain of proof detailing his reckless gambling, his affair, and his financial deceit. "We're going to nail that bastard to the wall," Darcy vowed, her voice steely with resolve. I believed her. With each new piece of evidence we uncovered, I could feel the shackles of Eli's control loosening. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was a woman on a mission for justice. The final straw came when I stumbled across a receipt for an expensive piece of jewelry, clearly a gift for his mistress. As I stared at the damning slip of paper, something inside me snapped. I was done being the scorned wife, crying in the shadows while Eli flaunted his infidelity. It was time to burn his world to the ground. It was the perfect opportunity, a big family gathering at Cal and Darcy's house for Darcy's birthday. Eli would be there, smug and oblivious as ever. But this time, I was ready for him. As everyone gathered in the backyard, laughing and making small talk, I caught Eli's eye from across the lawn. He gave me a mocking smirk, raising his beer in a mock salute. My blood boiled, but I forced a smile in return. This was all part of the plan. Once we were all settled around the patio table, I cleared my throat loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Before we start eating, I have something to share with all of you," I announced, my voice surprisingly steady. "Something you all deserve to know." Eli shot me a warning glare, but I pressed on. "For months now, my husband has been lying to us. To all of us." I turned to Cal and Darcy, feeling a pang of guilt for what I was about to reveal. He manipulated you into putting our house in your name, Cal, all because he's drowning in debt from his gambling addiction. Gasps rippled through the gathering as I laid out the evidence. Bank statements, credit card bills, everything Darcy and I had painstakingly gathered. Eli's face turned a mottled shade of red, but I didn't stop there. And if that wasn't enough, I continued, he's also been carrying on an affair for months now. With some cheap mistress, he's been showering with expensive gifts bought with money he doesn't even have. I held up the damning jewelry receipt, letting it do the talking. Eli jumped to his feet, spewing denials and curses, but no one was listening. The truth was out in the open, laid bare for everyone to see. Cal looked like he'd been punched in the gut, while Darcy was practically trembling with rage. The rest of the family just stared in stunned silence, unable to process the depth of Eli's betrayal. Through it all, I remained stoic, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. When I was finished, I turned to Eli, meeting his hate-filled glare with an icy calm. "You're done ruining my life," I said, my voice low but laced with steel. "It's over. You've lost everything." To his credit, Eli didn't go down without a fight. He ranted and raved, hurling insults and accusations like a cornered animal. But in the end, it didn't matter. The truth was out and there was no walking it back. As the party dispersed in stunned silence, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. The weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted, and in that moment, I knew I'd won. Eli could rage and bluster all he wanted, but his games were over. He'd lost control, and there was no getting it back. Not this time. After the explosive reveal at Darcy's birthday party, the legal battle began in earnest. With Cal's support and testimony, I hired a shark of a lawyer to take Eli down once and for all. The first order of business was getting the house back in my name. My lawyer made a strong case that the transfer to Cal had been done under false pretenses and coercion by Eli. To my relief, the judge agreed. Eli's lies and manipulation were undeniable given the mountain of evidence we presented. Mr. Grayson clearly had no intention of this being a temporary measure. The judge stated sternly, his actions were a deliberate attempt to defraud his wife and conceal assets from creditors. The property will be returned to Mrs. Grayson's name immediately. I had to fight back tears of relief as the gavel came down. After months of feeling trapped and hopeless, I finally had my home, my security back. But we weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next phase was going after Eli for his various financial crimes, the hidden debts, the shady loans, even his gambling losses. My lawyer was relentless, digging up every shred of evidence to bury him. During one particularly heated court session, Eli's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive, scorned wife out for revenge. He might as well have been speaking Greek for all the good it did him. "Your client is a con man and a liar who systematically robbed his wife of her financial security to fuel his vices," my lawyer fired back, his voice booming in the courtroom. "He has no one to blame but himself for the consequences of his reprehensible actions." Eli shot me a venomous glare from across the room, but I simply met his gaze with an icy stare. He had no power over me anymore. In the end, the judge saw right through Eli's desperate attempts at playing the victim. He was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, financial crimes, and concealing assets. Not only would he face potential jail time, but he was also ordered to pay me a hefty settlement, one that would ensure I never had to worry about money again. As we walked out of the courthouse that final day, Eli brushed past me, his expression a mask of pure hatred. "You're going to regret this," he hissed under his breath. "You haven't seen the last of me." I simply laughed in his face. "I already have everything I want, Eli. You've got nothing left to take from me." Finally free of his toxic grasp, I could breathe again. The long, dark tunnel of our marriage was finally behind me, and the future looked brighter than ever. Eli could make all the empty threats he wanted. He was a ghost of the past, a cautionary tale of how low a person could sink. As for me, I was just getting started on the rest of my life. In the aftermath of my legal victory over Eli, everything seemed to crumble around him at lightning speed. It was almost dizzying to watch. First, his mistress caught wind of the whole sordid affair and dropped him like a bad habit. Apparently, she wasn't too keen on being with a broke, disgraced loser after all. Who would have thought? Then the professional fallout began. Eli had worked in real estate, and word travels fast in that world. As soon as the details of his fraud and deception hit the news, no reputable agency would touch him with a 10-foot pole. His career was essentially over before it could really begin. Meanwhile, I was just getting started on rebuilding my life without his toxic presence weighing me down. With the generous settlement from the court case, I was able to pay off what remained of Eli's debt and still had plenty left over. Cal and Darcy were incredibly supportive throughout everything. I'll never forget the day Darcy showed up at my door with a bottle of champagne and the biggest grin on her face. "We're throwing you a party," she announced, "to celebrate you getting that scumbag out of our lives for good." The party ended up being a total rager, with friends and family coming from all over to raise a glass to my fresh start. Even Cal's stoic demeanor couldn't hide his relieved smile as we clinked drinks. "I'm just glad that whole nightmare is over," he said. "You deserve so much better, Rowan." As I looked around at the smiling faces surrounding me, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. If it hadn't been for these amazing people having my back, I might never have found the strength to stand up to Eli. In the months that followed, I watched from the sidelines as Eli's life continued its downward spiral. More legal troubles and unpaid debts seemed to pile up by the week. He had burned every bridge and scorched every connection he'd once had. The worst punishment of all? Being forced to watch me actually thrive without him around. I could see it in his eyes whenever we encountered each other, that seething resentment that I had somehow won. But what he failed to realize was that I had already won the second I broke free from his toxic grip. The money, the house, all of that was just icing on the cake. After years of lying and cheating, Eli had nobody left but himself. Poetic justice at its finest. As for me, I had everything I could ever want: my freedom, my independence, and a priceless support system of people who truly cared about me. With their encouragement, I even started exploring new career opportunities that I never would have considered before. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, allowing me to spread my wings and finally live life on my own terms, and I had no plans of letting anyone clip those wings ever again. The renovations on the house were finally complete, and I couldn't be more thrilled with how it turned out. It was like a physical manifestation of my new life. Out with the old, in with a fresh start. As I stepped back to admire the sleek new kitchen with its modern appliances and marble countertops, I felt a surge of pride. This was my sanctuary, my clean slate. No more ghosts of the past lingering in every corner. "What do you think?" I asked Darcy, who had become my unofficial design consultant over the past few months. "Worth all the dust and noise?" She let out an appreciative whistle. "Girl, it looks amazing. You totally nailed the whole effortlessly chic vibe." Laughing, I pulled her in for a hug. If it hadn't been for Darcy's unwavering support, I'm not sure I would have made it through those dark days intact. She was the sister I never had, and I was eternally grateful. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new surroundings like a bear emerging from hibernation. Every morning, I'd make a cup of coffee and just soak in the peaceful ambiance of my beautifully remodeled home. No more chaos, no more negativity, just serene tranquility. Of course, Eli tried to rear his ugly head a few times during the process. He'd show up unannounced, ranting about how I had stolen the house from him. More than once, I had to threaten to call the cops to get him to leave. "You think this is over?" He'd snarl, his face twisted with rage. "I'm going to make your life a living hell until you give me what's mine." I'll admit there were moments when his threats shook me, stirring up those old feelings of dread and anxiety. But they never lasted long. I had worked too hard to reclaim my power to let him slither his way back into my head. "This is my home, Eli," I stated calmly after one of his outbursts. "A home and a life that you gambled away through your own selfish actions. Whatever hell you're living in now, that's on you, buddy." Eventually, his attempts to terrorize me became less frequent until they stopped altogether. The last I heard, he had fled the state, likely to escape the mountain of debts and legal troubles still hounding him. Good riddance. As for me, my new life was just beginning. With the house situation settled and that dark chapter finally closed, I started exploring new career opportunities. I wasn't interested in just treading water anymore. I was ready to dive in headfirst and chase bigger dreams. A few months later, I landed an incredible marketing job at a prestigious firm in the city. It was a huge step up, with better pay and opportunities for growth. More importantly, it allowed me to flex my creativity and talent in ways I hadn't experienced in years. On my first day, as I settled into my bright, airy new office, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. From the depths of Eli's betrayal and despair, I had clawed my way back to take control of my own narrative. No more living in someone else's shadow, no more sacrificing my dreams and self-worth for a relationship built on lies. This was my life now, and I was going to live it to the fullest, on my own terms. The future was a blank canvas, and I held the brush. Whatever I chose to create, to build from those ashes of my past, was entirely up to me. And this time, there was no one to stop me from painting my masterpiece.